Greetings, greetings, greetings. It is I, your king, as well as Archbishop and CA again, here doing what we're obligated to, is to do the work of the King's Bench in regards to protecting our heirs, which is our peers, who are also lords. As a result of, as we already implemented in this lesson, our identity as Englishmen and women as being affiliated with the English Church of England, now called the English Church, has been usurped by abstract religion known as Protestant and Anglicanism, which was a faith created under Joseph of Arimathea, which was for those who are now subject to Christianity through the English Reformation, going back to Pope Gregory I in the 5th century, 5th or 6th century. So now, as we have shown you, two important historical characters known as Absalom Jones and Richard Allen, who were subject to the institution of the Anglican and Protestant faith, that they have quoted that they wanted to go back to the original custom and faith that they practiced, which was anciently relative to the Church of England, or related to the Church of England, which we know it was not that influenced upon by way of what we call Supremacy Act of 1558 by Elizabeth I, as well as the 1534 Supremacy Act of King Henry VIII. We know that all the houses of Tudors, the rulers and the queen, were de facto because they were descendants of John Gaunt. John Gaunt was the son of Edward I, Edward III, and Edward III descendants were practicing what we call kinatic succession. As we see, this is the condition that we're subject to as a result of the ruling minor of the United Kingdom is Elizabeth I first. And as we're going to show you in the upload that will be up shortly, that Elizabeth I is related, yes, to the House of Tudors. All right, we'll be giving that to you shortly. But back to part 6. Dealing with the hell of our brothers and sisters who are subject to, which apparently the Christian practice of Absalom Jones and Richard Allen was not to their liking, so therefore they chose to go back to the customary faith of the Church of England, which we are all requesting you do the same. As a result, this is where your salvation comes from, because as we know, as being beneficiary to the estate left by our heirs within the trust, and we know that the trust is based off of K trust, which means that we are beneficiaries to that estate. And we know estate, in lieu of that trust, is handled by a trustee, and the trustees here are now is based off the state. And the state had dishonored the trusteeship of their looking over the assets that were left by our heirs, i.e. the grantor, i.e. the king. And I'm your king, and I'm here to return back those assets. That's part of our estate. I'll bring you back to the clarity of who you are as an English man and woman, subject to these religions that are now called many religions now, but their origin goes back to the Protestant and Anglican faith. So with that, let's continue on with this beautiful lesson. We already established the Act of Settlement of 1701 in regards to written the English Church of England, ran by de facto parliament under the from the influence of the Roman Catholic Church. This happened to be under the authority of King Charles I. King Charles I was the son of King James, who descended down from the house of from the Kingdom of Scotland under the Church of Scotland, under its founder John Knox. We know that the affiliation with the Parliament of England and Parliament of Scotland came by way of the Treaty of Union of 1707, and that was preceded by the Settlement Act of 1701. And as we have shown by part 1, part 2, part 3, as well as part 5 and 6, that a lot of this stems from acts that were committed outside of the Act of Parliament, going back to our ancestors, which were the Plantagenet Crown. Because we know that ship money started from the Plantagenet Crown in times of war, but we are still in a time of war as regard of being subject to militias, as established by July 2nd, 1776 Constitution, which we have shown on the record today, as well as our past videos, that our immediate government, which is ran by your local government, i.e. your county, your city, your municipality, your villages, your boroughs, are controlled by your local militia, which we call your captains. And these officers are obligated to the captain, which is funded by what we call the inferior officers, known as your General Assembly and your council. And these are the members who make up your inferior local government, which are actually established as companies by our fourth branch of government under what we call the New Deal. Prior to that, the only legislative authority was the legislative, executive, and judicial branch. And you are not subject to any one of those because you're not subject to a proper government. And this is why we're here today, to bring you back to the proper government under the proper authority of a proper leader of a government, which is the English, because English is the predominant language here. English law is the predominant law here, and English custom is the predominant customs here. So therefore, you must not look unlikely to that. So without further ado, if the archbishops and say want to say a couple of words before we get started, allow them to do so. If not, let them digress.
I digress. Let's go ahead and get started.
I digress. Let's get started.
Okay. So background, dealing with the Plantation Act and Naturalization Act of 1740, as well as the Negro Act of 1740, because I want y'all to pay very close attention to South Carolina. We know that most of these so-called states were called provinces at this particular time, known as colonies. But we're dealing with a Plantation Act and a Naturalization Act of those who are practicing the religion of Protestant Anglicanism, which was created for the plantations who set up colonies, and they also, by way of enslaving and indenturing the so-called English people, to now take upon this colorable and unjust faith that's were not their own, as we just heard it from the mouth of Absalom Jones and Richard Allen. So now this actually takes place in what we call British North America. Let's take a look at that.
Point of interest, I don't think we recorded the Absalom Jones on this one yet. We haven't showed them that yet.
We haven't shown them that yet?
Mm-mm.
Okay, my bad. I apologize for that. We're going to show you in a second, though. So we were just talking about that off the record.
Yeah, that was just off the record. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Well, we'll go through that another day. Yeah, because that'll be a long topic, a long subject matter. All right, let's go here. All right, this is dealing with the Plantation Act and Naturalization Act of 1740, which is in reference to the Negro Act of 1740. And as we established for the record that the Negro Act of 1740, as we heard it by the judge, what was his name? Burton, whatever his name was, Burton.
Belton.
Burton what?
Belton.
Belton, yes. He was the author of the Negro Act of South Carolina. And as it stated in the Negro Act of South Carolina, they make reference to the ancient Berbers being enslaved. All right. So now, once these ancient Berbers being enslaved and forced to a religion, i.e., Anglicanism and Protestantism, they became also naturalized as citizens on these plantations. Do you hear what we're saying? They became naturalized and became citizens of the plantations in lieu of them being naturalized as a citizen in regards to the territories governed under these monarchs. And the territories governed under these monarchs in reference to the Negro Act being affiliated by naturalization on these plantations covered a vast territory. Let's see how vast this territory covered. Look at that, y'all. Look at the territory that these acts committed by King George II. He was not even part of what we call the royal family, because the House of Stuart was restored in 1660, right? You didn't get to King George I in 1714, and that is a result of the Settlement Act of 1701, of who would inherit the crown, who assumed the practice of the Protestant faith and the Anglican faith, and not the Roman Catholic faith. And we know we get into that history, we get into the history of what we call the planters. Mm-hmm. All right. So as we can see, British North America in regards to the Negro Act of 1740 encompasses all of these territories. All these territories. All right. It also included what we were speaking about, the Northwest Ordinances of 1787.
Yep.
Because you see the Lake, Great Lake Ordinances color red. All right. Let's see. Let's go a little further. It says, British America comprised the colonial territories of the British Empire in the Americas from 1607, King James, to 1783, King George III, Treaty of Oh, sweat. My battery went dead. Stop it, Archbishop. Greetings, greetings, greetings. We're back again, the King's Bench, with the excellent, with His Excellency, myself, as well as Archbishop Belmont, Co-Adjutor, Archbishop Murphy, as well as all those who are viewing this beautiful content. We come with the closing part 6 of how to get us out of this hell that was established by religion known as Protestant and Anglicanism, pushed upon the English heirs and successors by way of those contracting parties known as the 13 colonies or the British colonies. My screen just go blank. 1 second. What happened? I don't want that. Give me 1 second, just get my screen right. Okay, yes. Known as the 13 British colonies. So they have established a religion called Anglicanism and Protestantism. And it's our obligation as English nationals to relieve you of that burden by way of restoring what was which was actually yours, which was your English identity as English heirs. And the only way we can do that is to restore that history that was created in place of your English history. And this was British America, then known as the United Colonies. We already established that the United Colonies, once the cat has been taken out the bag in regards to the identity of the United Colonies, now be calling themselves state by amending the September 22nd Constitution of 1777, and now calling themselves United States. This was the breach of the contract. So it states here, in lieu of the breach of the contract with British Americas no longer going by the 13 colonies, it said British America comprised the colonial territory of British America, of the British Empire in the Americas from 1607 to 1783. This is the time from King James to King George III, when they separated from Great Britain. But we know there wasn't separation because under Title 16, Chapter 1, Section 28, there's rights stated under the Charter of Great Britain that are saved from repeal. These rights are the rights that protect us as heirs of the English Third Temple Church, reformed from the English Church of England, that goes back to time immemorial. It says these colonies were formerly known as British America and the British West Indies before the 13 colonies declared their independence in the American Revolutionary War in 1775 to 1783 and formed what they call the United States of America, which we're now subject to. Okay, there's a problem with that. Why? Because we're going to go here. Where's it at? Okay. Plantations. Come up. Okay, plantation. The term plantation, settlement, or colony. So they're showing you plantation, settlement, or colony is interchangeable. They're synonymous. All right. Plantation was an early method of colonization in which settlers went to establish a permanent or semi-permanent colonial base, such as for planting tobacco or cotton. This is why when you deal with the antediluvian period of slaves, what they were working on, farms, plantations, right? But you were not the ones supposed to be working in the occupation. You were the kings. You were subjects of the king, i.e. heirs. So if anybody was supposed to be working those plantations, it was those colonies who created plantations based off a grant that were given to them by de facto monarchs. And now we know that. So therefore, we have to claim back our estate as heirs, that we can claim back those states which are considered to be plantations that the colonies set up and stole our birthright on them. And now got us picking cotton and tobacco, not on farms now, but in what we call companies. All right. Plantation was an early method of colonization in which settlers went to establish a permanent or semi-permanent colonial base, such as for planting tobacco or cotton. Such plantations were also frequently intended to promote Western culture and Christianity among nearby indigenous people, as can be seen in the early East Coastal plantation in America, such as that of Roanoke. If I'm not mistaken, that's Virginia.
Mhm.
All right. Let's go back to the origin of plantations. Britain and Ireland. Starting now, remember Title 16, Chapter 1, Section 28, right? State under the charge of Great Britain, saved from repeal. So this is just because they go over and misnomer someplace over there, Britain, that don't mean that they're talking about here. When we talk about Britain, we're not talking about over there. We're talking about right here, because we have a statute deriving from ancient legislation that protects the laws pertaining to Britain and its citizens under the authority of a monarch of England, which is known as Great Britain, and not what they call the UK. So it says that starting with the reign of Henry III of England, the English crown began a policy of castle building and settling buildings in Wales to control the population, and strategically surrounding the newly conquered kingdom of Gwent. Now, when it said Henry III, you automatically brings you right back to the plantation crown.
Mm-hmm.
There you see it. Predecessor, John, who signed the Magna Carta. All right. Edward I, the one who came up what we call the courts of chancery. Edward I. All right, his house. The Plantagenet house. Do y'all see that? The Plantagenet house. The Plantagenet we just went over. When we went over ship money, it mentions the Plantagenet house of the origin of taxing when it was a time of war. We're still in a time of war. Why? Because they're still collecting ship money by these captains every time they took you into one of these courts of common pleas, now called courts of exchequer chamber. Why? Because you're in hell. Right. And the only way out of hell is through the courts of chancery. Why? Because the courts of chancery goes back to the courts of Edward I, which you just seen, which goes back to the courts of the plantation under the King Godfrey, the fifth Caliban Jew, which I'm the reincarnation of, which I am your king. Why? Because we have to restore the original planters. How we know that? Let's go check it out. Henry, background in childhood. No, let's not go there. Doing Henry II. My wife's coming in too. All right, so let's go to our closing right here. Planter. This will close us out. Read that for me, Archbishop.
Plant. The ancestors of the Plant family brought their name to England in the wave of migration after the Norman conquest of 1066. The name Plant is for a gardener, as the name was originally derived from the Old English word plant, meaning plant or young tree.
Okay.
The surname Plant was first found in London, where they held a family seat, being descended from Fulk, the Count of Anjou, whose descendants were exemplified by the Emperor Henry V of Germany, and Henry was ascended the English throne and planted the Plantagenet dynasty. He bore the three royal lines which continued until the time of Edward III, who added a crest of another lion. The eventual heiress of the house was the Princess Elizabeth of York, daughter of Edward IV and queen of Henry VII. Many junior lines abound.
Okay, so as you can show you, the word plant or planter all stems from the descendants of the Counts of Anjou. And Godfrey the fifth Count of Anjou, father of Henry II, the father of John who signed the Magna Carta, was the son of Fulk, the ruler of Jerusalem. So there you have it. If you're claiming to be the children of God, then you must return back to Jerusalem. And the only way you're back to Jerusalem, because the word Jerusalem means what? City of peace.
City of peace.
You know what I'm saying? He was called the King of Peace. King Edgar the Peaceful. So if you want to have a ring in a kingdom without wars, you better come back here. Because we don't have to put up arms anymore. Why? Because there is no state of war. Once you declare that you're no longer in a state of war, but you're now in a colony and you're holding those obligated parties to the settlements that they created on the plantations to yield and grow crops for us, which now we don't need them anymore. Why? Because we have the right to assume our own authority of our own estate. So there you have it, brothers and sisters. You are now been awakened to who you are as heirs and beneficiaries of the greatest estate that anyone can ever have. We have proven it by way of our breach of the original contract by way of the Constitution of July 2nd, 1776, which is the contract that promulgated by the 1606 Charter in regards to the contracting parties, the colonies who stepped these plantations, and the king whose descendants are the heirs and successors who descended down from the English Third Temple Church, now called the Third Temple English Church of England, under the tutorship and guidance under Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont, C.A. Kajuda from the House of Murphy, and I, your king, King Clifford Jefferson from the House of Godfrey on the 5th Count of Anjou, son of Godfrey, the son of Folk, who descended down from the greatest kings of Wessex, all the way back to King Edward the Peaceful, on down to Alfred the Great, which means wise elf, going back to those elves of Albion, which is Albion, which means that the whole empire. So welcome home to your vast empires, brothers and sisters. We love you. We want nothing but the best for you. It's the only way that you can plant yourself in the soil best suitable for your growth is this of New Jersey. And with that, we'll say peace.
Peace.